A very, very good evening. Warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows, and welcome back in what has become an annual pilgrimage for the show to not just Scotland, to not just St Andrews, but to 18, the restaurant atop the Russecks, one of my favourite hotels in the world. And this is a restaurant which, despite what one or two food critics might think, is definitely one of my favourites. In fact, on my agenda for this evening is a rather large slab of steak, some good red wine, and a celebration of being back at what is my very favourite event of the entire year, unless, of course, Mrs. Nicholl is watching, in which case it is our wedding anniversary. I love this place for many reasons. They've got a terrific team. There's a warm sense of fuzzy nostalgia when I come back, as it is a trip I've been doing for many years. But also it just feels so fundamentally Scottish. I'm looking out the window at the moment. There is a very light mist. There is grey sky. It's basically springtime in Scotland. Somebody did say to me on my way in, one of the locals, that I was so lucky to get such good weather. The kind of weather in South Africa would be lighting a fire and bunkering down for the next week. It is weather that makes it absolutely perfect for red wine, and that forms the core of today's show. In just a moment, I'll be joined by a very good friend of mine, a very good friend of the show, is Gareth Robertson, who is the, I think he's Global Director of World Domination for wine at Anthonij Rupert, something similar. What he does this week is a very tough job, but one I know he revels in, and that is showcasing not just the wines of Anthonij Rupert, but some of South Africa's finest premium wines to an audience that certainly knows its wine and is just the kind of audience you really want South African wine to be put to, and he'll be doing that through the course of this week. So today on the show, I'll be talking through some of the fine wine that is on display this week at St Andrews, but also talking to Gareth, who spends a lot of time traveling the world, how South African wine is doing at a premium level in different countries. And I'll tap into my American experiences a little later as to why I think that is even more important than ever. It's not the only traveling I've been doing. I did get to spend the weekend in Belfast in Northern Ireland, where I got to catch up with one of our great supporters of the show, my dear mother, who was watching away. And it was a chance to get out to one of the many fine restaurants in Belfast. The culinary scene in Northern Ireland has exploded over the last few years. We got to go to Edo restaurant, and there were a couple of great wines we sampled there. There was a Barbara, that's the one on the left there, the Barbara d'Alba. It was 2023, so it was certainly very young, but it's the kind of grape that, when well made, you can drink relatively early in its career. There was a gentle smoothness to it, some nice bright fruit, and it worked pretty well. And then only a year older, wine that in Priorat would be Grenache, but for us would be Grenache. This is a kind of northwestish of Barcelona. It's an area I didn't really know much about until earlier this year, when I met some guys from the Perinet winery in Madrid who'd come up to meet me and introduce their wine to me. Priorat, along with Rioja, the only two areas that have got the top classification of wine in Spain, and this was a delight. They don't have great yield, so the wine is very intense, it's very rich, it's generally quite expensive because the yields are so low, but it's an area that's blessed by, amongst other things, a history of South Africans making wine there. Ibn Sadi, one of the many South Africans who spent some time in Priorat. If you haven't had it before, you may know Rioja, you might not know Priorat. Fix that at your next opportunity. Also got to meet some wine from the Wine Society, which this year celebrates 150 years. They've got wine that throws back to some of the time they've spent serving wine to people around the world. And they do a lot of house brands, but made by top winemakers. And here are three great examples, all South African, in anti-clockwise order. A Cup Classique from Siemensir gave us our first Cup Classique in 71, and 53 years later, the Malans now have a classic Siemensir Bubbles, all stone fruit and dryness and citrus, as an offering for the Wine Society. Then possibly the single best value wine in Europe at the moment. This is Duncan Savage's Cinsault, £12.95 from the Wine Society. That is giving it away. Don't convert it to rands, or it's not, but in pounds, that is a cracking deal. And then also, I thought, terrific value, the wine on the left. That is the 2015 Kononkop Cabernet Sauvignon, the same year that gave us the Paul Sauer that got the 100 points. Arbely Beerslaw still making the wine at this stage. I drank all three of these wines. That Cabernet Sauvignon was classic Stellenbosch. You'd pick it out from 100 others, all dark fruit and graphite and savoury delight. It's a terrific wine, and all three of those, not just in their own right great, but a wonderful advert for the quality of South African wine. Speaking of quality South African wine, really got some good stuff coming up. Gareth Robertson has outdone himself with his selection this evening. We'll dive into those in just a moment. Before we do, here's some of the latest wine news. Okay, and where Winemakers Guild of Nedbank is this weekend, the 40th edition, Friday and Saturday. You'll remember last week we had Andrea Mullineaux and Samantha O'Keefe, along with Greg Sherwood, Master of Wine, I legally have to say that, joining us on the show. And they were so excited about the wine that is being presented this weekend, from the aforementioned Aubrey Beersla's last wine with Canon Cop to another edition of the Big Dog Bubbles. I think there's a couple of really special Shennons and Chardonnays standing out. Some superstar from the Newton Johnsons. There's just so much great wine. If you are there, you're in for a cracker. That's the Lord Charles Hotel. But if you're not, if you are following this online, hoping to buy some wine online, then registration is now open. So get over to the Cape Winemakers Guild auction, register, and prepare yourself for a very, very special weekend featuring some unique and extremely rare South African wine. Also this week, tomorrow night, in fact, I won't be there as I'm in Scotland. I'll be there in spirit. It's the Norman Goodfellows at Four Ways Crossing. It is the Cape Point Vineyards wine tasting. These guys did so much to put South African Sauvignon Blanc on the map internationally. The proximity to the ocean, the space they find themselves in, terroir that's just made for Sauvignon Blanc. It's not all they do, but it is very much the driving force behind the vineyards. And your chance tomorrow evening to sample some with Norman Goodfellows. Tickets available to Norman Goodfellows website. A small donation, all of that goes to charity, and in return you get a terrific night of exceptional wine tasting. Well, this is a very exciting partnership for Dan Really Likes Wine. We're joining up with the team at Porcupine Ridge for the Pizzeria Challenge 2024. Your chance to decide who the best purveyor of pizzas in the country are. You need to head over to votepizza.wine, see the participating pizzerias, get voting, and not only can you support your favorite pizza joint, but you can also win terrific prizes every single week. There's wine to be given away, there are pizza accessories, and there's a grand prize that includes a pizza oven. And when it comes to that grand prize and to the overall winners, the top 10, the top 3, and the champion, well, Dan Really Likes Wine is going to be doing something rather special with Porcupine Wine and our very best pizza people in South Africa. I'm really, really excited about this. Yes, I'm going to have to eat loads of great pizza and wash it down with some rather nice wine, but these are the sacrifices we make on Dan Really Likes Wine. Votepizza.wine. Get over there, have a look through, get voting, win some prizes, and help us and Porcupine Ridge to discover who the best pizzeria in South Africa is. That's underway. Get voting, win some prizes, and be part of a really cool competition. Right, well, let's switch over to our show today. Gareth, lovely to have you on the show. All seems slightly odd calling him Gareth because the whole world knows him as Bear, except I'd imagine probably like a mum or an aunt or an elderly relative, or your wife when she's not happy with you.
100% nail on the head there.
Oh, welcome to what is, it looks like quite a glamorous week for you, but I know you do an awful lot of work because you don't just have the Wines of Anthonij Rupert, which you represent day to day, but you're very generous with this particular week, as is Johan Rupert, our host this week, that desire to bring in more than just your own brands, bring in brands that certainly there's already a relationship and friendship with, but that I know you guys feel very, very firmly expand the South African wine story and just help this week to show more people who are lovers of fine wine just how good the South African offering is.
Yeah, Dan, it's firstly, it's an amazing occasion and a platform to show top South African wines. I'm speaking on Mr. Rupert's behalf, it was all about promoting top-end South African wine to this crowd of people, and it's really got a following. Every year that I come back and grayer and larger.
Speak for yourself, Gareth Robertson.
It's coming back and just the friends that you made over the years and how more wine and South African wine is being taken seriously. Guys are already asking, okay, what are you showing on Thursday for the tasting and those sort of side of things, and what's been served, what's new. It's great, and I think, if there's ever in the wine business in South Africa, I think we're really serving some amazing premium wines. So I know we're going to chat a bit about that a bit later today, but it's a great sort of platform to showcase these wines.
And that's exactly what I did want to speak about, that issue of showcasing in premium. I was in America for most of August, which is a very cost-effective place to visit on the Rand, and I had a number of conversations, but the one that struck me most importantly was with Jim, who does such a great job with Woza in the United States. And he was talking to me about how they were seeing maybe a little attrition at the bottom end, the bulk wine that's going over, the stuff that sits $4, $5, $6 ago at the bottom of the supermarket shelf. But where they were seeing a bit of appreciable traction was the top end, with the wine that people were starting to see, hang on, this does sit with a top Napa, it sits with a top Bordeaux, a top Burgundy. This is wine that deserves that seat at the table. And I think that's been a long time coming. We're certainly not anywhere near where we'd like to be, but we're a lot further on from where we were. And it is people like yourself spending those hours walking the streets of Hong Kong and San Francisco and London and Paris, and talking to restaurants and to high-end wine sellers about, hey, this is our wine and this is where it deserves to be.
Yeah, I think, obviously there's a lot of foot soldiers for South Africa, so colleagues and friends in the industry that do a lot of great work. And I agree with that. We've sort of seen it where South Africa a lot of it was like sort of banned at that below $9.99 and stuff like that. And that market has almost like fallen out. And sort of some of South African entries is now at $15.99, where you're seeing Roch, Shannon, our Protea wines, and some of the other wineries that are sincerely Sauvignon and those sort of wines out in the trade. I'm talking about particularly in the US. And then you just start jumping into where the other wines are, like the Ernie House or the Ristenfreders and the Hamilton Russells and all these other sort of wines. The Optima included in that, where people are going, wow, this is amazing value for what I'm getting, And I was in the Netherlands this last week, and we did a tasting for these people, and it was a wine evening, and I said, I'm not telling you the prices. They had to sort of come back with the prices. And when they actually realized what it really showed that actually we are serving premium and what we are delivering.
That's a really important point, that price, because I think when we started, now I'm speaking broadly with big strokes, but when we started, when South African wine was allowed back into the rest of the world, it was a case of, well, let's start at the bottom and work our way up. And as we've said so many times on the show, it's very hard to sell somebody a bottle of wine for £50 when they know it's £5. And for most people, whether it is an entry-level South African wine or it is an Ernie Els or Rustenfreder and Anthonij Rupert, it's South African wine. And we can't expect the entire market to understand that. So that shifting it up, how difficult have you found that in terms of getting above that, it's great value conversation, which I really hope we don't talk about in the next 5 years, and really get people just focused on, hey, this is good quality.
Yeah, so I think, you're 100% right, where South Africa was sort of banned. I think in the UK, everyone thinks we were like £5.99. And just because we hadn't had some really premium sort of wines. I think what's happened in the past is we're making fantastic wines. A lot of it's swallowed up in South Africa. So you almost need to scale it. And I think brands like the Rupert Rothschilds, like Sister Farm, what Chocolate Block has done, seriously, Old Dirt is doing, is where brands can scale and actually produce consistently really good quality and at a more of a premium price, and where people are going, wow, tonight I'm tasting the Optima. This is an amazing premium product. And then they always ask you do revert back to the value thing, but when they look at the price, they're like, cheap, this is a no-brainer,
Is there a sense where with certain elements of the market where you're making wine that is premium and it's not in hundreds of thousands of bottles, where it almost needs to be at a certain price for people to take it seriously?
Yeah, I think so. Like, if you think about the US and what Yellowtail did, they were like $6.99. And it hasn't really helped them in the long run. I think Australian wine has really taken a beating because everyone thought they were low down. You can pick up, it's a hard sell for Australian Syrah, Shiraz at $20 unless they've got all the Parker points and everything like that. So for instance, like Two Hands still carries on, but it's a lot harder. And I think things are changing. People are being more acceptable to South African wines. And you know what? With these direct flights into South Africa, has also been a thing. I definitely, when you go through the winelands, we've seen it at our cellar door, a lot more Americans coming in. And I went to a talk with Alan Whitney the other day, and he was talking about how they eventually got the flight, because everyone just thinks it's so simple of getting these direct flights. But that's also a great sort of thing, or where people are having an amazing sort of experience in South Africa, amazing wines sort of thing, and then going back, and I think that's definitely helping us, spread the South African gospel of premium. Yeah.
Final question, because all this talk of wine has made me rather thirsty on this particular topic. The global footprint that we are hoping to have is driven by the foot soldiers you mentioned, like yourself, traveling around the world. There's a lot of excitement about America, but we know it's not an easy market to crack. Every state has its own rules and regulations, and it's a nightmare for people like yourself. The East, we think there's some potential, but I'm not sure exactly how much there is. When you look at what you do, when you look at your travels, where for you is the brightest future for premium for South Africa?
Yeah, so I think the US is definitely an opportunity. I think people are, and I think maybe in premium is they used to purchasing sort of premium, and they used to buying a lot of foreign wine as well, other than their domestic. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there. I think the US is a complicated business, so either you're going with the big guys and trying to get more of a footprint. So you have to really be careful of who your partner is, I think. We've got fantastic partners there in the US, and are really driving premium, so which is great, but it's having people out and maybe conquering small little states. We've been in like states that you don't really consider. We have success there. Other chains like HEB or Trader Joe's or something like Whole Foods hop onto them and saying, wow, you've done that in such a small market, and then it carries on, so we get some scale in other sort of markets. So yeah, I think traveling to the US is expensive. It's quite a complicated market, but I think once you've got your distributor, and our importer is only South African wines, which is great. It's focused.
That's a very wise importer.
Very wise. They're definitely South African owned. So they've got an amazing portfolio, and they've got dedicated teams. I think it's not trying to be with the Glaciers or the Republics, these big sort of corporates, because then you're really a number, But South Africa still's got a long way. We've got some small wins now, but you have to get out there, and I'm always a fan that the more South African wine we sell in these at premium prices, the better for everyone.
Rising tide on all ships.
100%. And there's just a lot of guys that are passionate and getting out there and doing good things. So yeah, if you can afford it, travel there, spend the time, and you'll reap the rewards.
All right. We are still one more wine away from actually starting our wine, because I do want to, we haven't opened this just yet. I want to save it for dinner a little later. But I didn't want to talk to you about it because in itself, it's a great deal of fun as a wine, but also as a category. This is the Lomoran Private Cuvée. The bottle is gorgeous. And I know that you spend a lot of time, if I looked at something like the Jean Roy bottling, and the aesthetic is really important. You've got contents inside, of course, which match the quality of the aesthetic, but at a premium level. How much time, how much ever? I'll give you another look at it just to think, I mean, that's a gorgeous bottle. There's a lot of tiny detail you can see at the top there as well. How much time and effort goes into creating the look and feel of this? And do you actually have the data that comes back and says, you know what, this makes a definite impact on what we sell?
Yeah, I don't know about data coming back, and I think it's more feedback from the proprietor, but who's done an amazing job in the luxury space, So I think it's, for us is creating a premium product. How do we package this sort of side of thing? And I think packaging is really, really important. I think when you're serving like a Jean Noir or the bubbles, something like that, and you're presenting it properly, people's eyes are already drawn to it and have more of a fuzzy, warm feeling that, yes, I'm willing to spend. The taste, the contents, which is good. And then, should be a home run. It's not always, but yeah, it should be.
I drank some of the rosé on Friday for lunch, and it's not dissimilar to this, in that there's a real elegance, real delicacy to the wine without losing that fruit, which certainly comes through. And that leads into this broader feel I have for our bubbles at the moment. There is so much more finesse to what we're creating. And I think we've understood that we're not trying to replicate champagne, but we are trying to get up to a level where people see us as, oh, this is a very, very good alternative to something that's often significantly higher priced. Is the market suggesting to you that that gap is closing?
Yeah, so for my recent travels this past week in Europe and in the UK, it's been amazing, because I think Prosecco has really dominated that entry level, and we can never compete on that. And always call it the soda stream wine, but yeah, don't quote me on that. But
you do know we're on a live show at the moment. Hello, Italy, how are you? This is Gareth Robertson.
Yeah, so I think Prosecco's it's had an amazing run, and it's been very good. I think people are starting, and the feedback that you get from restaurants and sort of buyers is that people want to step it up one little bit, But currently, you've got quite a big gap between British fizz and entry-level champagne, to say that, and there's quite a big gap. And I think where we slot in is South African Cup Classique is just above that. So people are upgrading to business class there, and getting this value. And Graham Beck, Simons, all these amazing sort of houses, and people are tasting and going, wow, that's. And we had some really amazing guys who say, tonight, let's leave the Prosecco. We're going to go with Cup Classique. We're going to charge a little bit more, and we know that the customer is going to be more happier with it.
I love that. And just from the way the wine is made, it's going to have a bit more to it. It's going to have
for sure
more richness, more volume, more fruit, more intensity. And it's also, we showed this, in fact, it's coming up next few weeks on the show. We paired with not just this rosé, but also with some of the Blanc de Blanc from Pierre Jourdain, from Cabrières, just down the road from you guys. Two bubbles that with food delivered something that was just so rewarding. And again, that's another step I think we're starting to take in an understanding of bubbles and food are two that go together so well.
Yeah, so it was really special to actually get that feedback. And I suppose Cave isn't a competition because it's pretty similarly priced where we're at. But I just think we yield so much more. We don't have a lot of our bubbles that you taste more regular, much more fresher, finer, and the guys are really doing it.
And they've got African sunshine.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Last one before we jump into this red, and that is the Chardonnay, which unfortunately is sitting just out of reach. Poor planning for me. But the white wine that over, I'd say probably the last 12 months, that has just been coming back to me time and again in terms of international critics, feedback from friends, new wine that's coming on after this surge of Chenin. And it's not to take away from Chenin, which has continued to do amazing things, but from a bit of a ropey patch where we bowed to the Church of Robert Parker and lots of over extraction, lots of extra wood, and it's taken a long time to get people to understand and past that. But so much of our Chardonnay now is all about the fruit, the elegance therein, and crafting a wine that's not about those external factors. It really is about the fruit itself.
Yeah, I think you've got to give it to the guys in the Hillman Arder, the Robertson, amazing side, and even if you're going into Stellenbosch or Franschhoek, guys are really producing top end quality Chard. I think the toning of the oak and making it more is quite a big thing, where they've made it more approachable. I personally find it's interesting when you go to do these social events or tastings, people are quite into Chard, where usually like, oh, okay, well, and pouring more. So I think that's positive. On an international scale, I think Burgundy prices have really
gone mad.
Nuts, yeah. So, and California are making great stuff, but we've got something a bit of a USP, and I just think the freshness and what the guys are doing and oak usage and those sort of side of things are really special, and guys can drink it and then going like, wow, this is great. Okay. So yeah, there's not a huge amount of bad Chard out there. So from a South African point of view.
Look out for a lot more on Chardonnay as we move into the spring and summer months in South Africa. If you've just joined us, this is a very special edition of Dan Really Likes Wine, coming to you from 18, the restaurant atop the Russell's Hotel in Scotland, in St Andrews, as part of the Alfred Dunhill Links Championships, where the tournament wine director is Gareth Robertson. And you're going to be pouring a lot of wine this week. Most of it, given the Scottish weather, is going to be red. And so time for us to get some wine into glass. We can start with Mr. Else, given we are at a golf event. And I think, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this to you, but if we go back to the very first, there we go, cheers, Annie. If we go back to the very first episode of Dan Really Likes Wine back in 2016, and obviously you were in matric and I was a year out of varsity.
You got that right.
The very first wines that we had on the show were the number 6 from Skalkberger, which I'm seeing in the corner, the Villafonte, which we don't have with us, the Series C, but a great wine, the Rustenfrieda 1694, we're going to taste that in a moment, as well as the Anthonij Rupert, it was the Anthonij Rupert blend, and then it was this one from Mr. Else. And I always love the story, and Louis Stradum has looked in on the show a number of times to tell us about Ernie falling in love with wine, but it's the words of Ernie himself that I particularly remember, and those were that I remember saying to me, Dan, I can sell the first vintage because of Ernie Else. The second vintage has to be because of the wine, and the fact that in a very premium space, the Ernie Else brand, in particular its Ernie Else signature, which I think was the first ever South African wine to retail at $100 in the American market, has not just sustained but flourished, is an indication that, yes, it's Ernie Else's name, but the most important thing is getting this wine right.
100%. And I think, the new owners of Ernie Else, I was there actually last week, and what they've done to the facility and the vineyards is just astronomical. They've spent a lot of time and effort, and Louis and his team, from a cellar door experience to the wines that they're actually producing. We were very fortunate. Got invited by Logan, and we sat and we tasted through the wines, and it was really spectacular. That view you can't kill. It's beautiful, and the wines that they're doing. And I think you're right. Ernie was, and the Rustenfrieda wines, and a couple other wines that we're not going to mention. But starting out in that sort of premium sort of wine, I think the Ernie Else and Rustenfriedas were, in the top hundreds a lot before a lot of other states that eventually got there. But I think you're 100% right. If the juice is not good in the bottle, it's a bit of a gimmick, and I think it's just stood the test of time. So
it's worth touching on Louis, as you mentioned him. He's been such a stalwart of the South African wine industry. Rustenfrieda, Ernie Else, bringing us wine that has had an appreciable sense of evolution, in that, like a lot of our wines that you often think, oh, this is just going to be this absolute blockbuster of a wine, there's often a lot more elegance and restraint to these wines than people first imagine. And for me, with this wine in particular, there's a significant portion of Helderberg Cabernet Sauvignon. And having been drinking a fair amount of Napa Cab now in America, having had my fair share of Cab out of Bordeaux, I'm not sure there is a site for Cabernet Sauvignon in the world that delivers such consistent elegance to the grapes that it offers.
Yeah, I think the Helderberg is, that's definitely sort of some of the best Cabernets coming off there, like when you're talking about the Riche, Rustenfrieda, DGP have obviously invested heavily into the Helderberg and Altos, and some of those wines can last as well, so I think it's really special what they're doing. They've retained that elegance, as you said, and this is a 2015, and that's drinking like an absolute treat, so it's almost 10 years old, and
there's still just that little tightness to it. It's still just a little wound up. It's not completely reached.
Exactly. And I think the current vintage is also, I think it's going to be 18, so to be corrected. So they've got some age, and they're not, smelling it and tasting it doesn't smell like it.
No, not at all. And that's one of the other things we have. We talk so often, especially in premium red, about the desire to age, the benefit of aging. but also so much of our wine. Give it a couple of years for that initial tannin to settle, especially if it's cab or cab based, and you can have a top wine that 3 years in is actually very approachable.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, like you're seeing a lot of wines that you know, brewer rights or you know, Skulk at Thaibosh and stuff like that, they're making it, but you know, the guys want to hold it back, but obviously they've got a business to run, so yeah, but the potential's there for sure.
Before we jump on to the next one that we're tasting, let's have a look at one of the wines that we aren't going to be tasting today. Otherwise, Gareth and I would be fast asleep in each other's arms on the couch next door. The number 6 from Skulk, that is one of the wines we had on that very first show. This pays tribute to the Jersey number of Skulkberger, who is, of course, the son of Skulkberger, who is the son of Skulkberger, who is the son of Skulkberger, and the Skulk who makes this wine is the father of Skulkberger, is also the grandfather of Skulkberger, just to clear all of that up. We had Scott on the show last year. This is a wine that initially, I think, when the idea comes to mind, must be so exciting. I'm going to make a wine that celebrates my son, one of the greatest rugby players of modern times. And then you stop and think, well, hang on, if I'm making a wine to celebrate my son, one of the greatest rugby players of modern times, it's got to be pretty damn good. And you've got to create something that I think both speaks broadly to the person you're paying tribute to, but also delivers a wine that people are going to go, wow, irrespective of who's on the label or who this, much like Ernie being on the label of his wine, the wine itself really has to deliver.
Yeah, I think you know, they're both Skulk Senior and Skulk Junior. They're big guys, so it's a big style wine, like, and it's well done. So I think that's, for me, it really does embody both Skulks there. What they're doing with it's a big sort of full throttle wine, but it's got some sort of elegance and it can last, you know. So over these years of tasting it, it's just really doing well, and they've got an amazing little patch of terroir in the Wellington there with their make it farm. So yeah, I think it's really a great wine in tribute to what they're trying to do, and maybe not as elegant as the only else that we tasted earlier, but something really.
And also there is definitely that. There are times, especially here in Scotland, where just a big, powerful, it's coming off the side of the scrum and it's flattening you kind of red wine.
It's a bit like that steak you're going to smash tonight.
Oh, and that's just my starter. All right, let's move on to wine number 2, this Ruston Frieda 1694. And again, this is proper premium. If you're buying this in South Africa, it's a considerable price. And that, again, just heightens that chasm between what we see as, oh my God, that's quite expensive in South Africa, versus, is this all it costs when I drink it in London, in New York, in Hong Kong? And as you said, we're closing that gap. But if you were to ask me, is this a good value wine? On a global scale, I will still say very much so, because the quality is so overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure. You know, they've been super successful from when Kevin Arnold was there and starting the estate, you know, with the Shiraz based in Cab and Merlot. It's sort of, I don't know, the Cape blend, and really getting it going. And this is just, I think, one level up from that. I don't know, estate is one of those stalwarts that's just stood the test of time. But yeah, the 1694 you can put out. And what I really like about it is the addition of the Shiraz. It just gives a bit of that mid palate. It's generous, but still classy and elegant, you know. And yeah, so I think at the state they don't have any left, so it's definitely selling well. So so it shows it's well packaged, and also it's another world-class sort of operation there.
And I think they really get it right with the Shiraz. If I look at some of the Australian versions, where we really see a lot of Cab Shiraz coming together, South Australia is in many ways the spiritual home of that coming together. But if we look at some of the more expensive ones, some other ones, and even some I've had from South Africa, there is a susceptibility to be just a little bit jammy and not quite get it right. Whereas there is a refinement to this. It's certainly a powerful wine, but it's regal in how it's come together.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I think this vintage of Canoe is still there, but don't know the elegance and that they've got. Don't know in the wine and that Shiraz. I think it gives it a bit of an X factor, you know. So
lots of fun. All right, a couple of others to sample before we go into our final one of the day. The Hanley R, the Rupert family, stretching just up the road to La Motte. Lamont, I'm very fond of because it's the first wine estate I ever visited in South Africa when I came down to university. And I should have had textbooks in first year. Instead, I had a case of Millennium, which was then the red blend of choice, and it was
quite fancy for students.
Well, if only I'd held on to some of it. It's the reason I had no textbooks. There've been a lot of developments and changes at the estate. There's some really cool factors. The art that's at the estate. It's an on and off home of Jan Hendrik, who's a regular. And this just home to some great wine. And I've always felt their own influence that comes into the wines of Lamont. I know that there's an appreciation of that style from the team there. And this Hunley R, like all of the wines we're drinking today, is that flagship that goes out and says, you know what, we think all of our wine's pretty good. But if you want something that's really going to remove your socks at high velocity, this is the one.
Yeah, definitely. I think Edmund's been there for many years. I wouldn't want to quote that, and they've really honed into that. I think from Jacques Borman's side, before Edmund was there, and you can see what Boschklip have done at their Shiraz, and so they've always had this infinity, and they've done it extremely well. And I just think we're looking again for Rhone sort of wines of that quality. This is our cheapest chips almost.
And I love the simplicity of the label. Keeping it in the family before we jump onto the blend, we spoke about the Chardonnay a little earlier. This is the Baron Edmund. The Rupert Rothschild Classique has become such a fixture in South Africa on wine lists everywhere. It's a great marketing success story, but you can't have that marketing success without wine that delivers, which it does. But this allows you to jump a rung or two up the ladder and create a red blend that, again, it takes what's at the heart of the estate and really lets it shine.
Yeah, so I think, and there's a lot of credit that needs to go to the late Anthonij, starting that operation with Benjamin Rothschild, and what they've achieved in the space of since '98. It's really a feel-good South African story of what Classique has done, and the consistency of that wine. They do it on decent sort of scale, and keeping the consistency of that. And every year it seems to get a little bit more serious and more better in that. But with the Baron Edmund is really about, that's more their sort of flagship, and what they're also doing with the Chard, which we spoke about earlier, is really premium, And I think obviously in smaller volumes, but you need those things to pull it through. And I think Carla and the team and JC, those guys have done a great job.
But also so nice for us to just give the French wine industry a helping hand by bringing them into South African fold, nudging them in the right direction.
Exactly.
Help those Rothschilds out, get some wine going. All right, so that's the bulk of it. There is one more to try. And I remember having a dinner actually at this event a number of years ago. And I won't fling names from a dizzy height, but I will say that there were some rather celebrated actors and athletes, because celebrity is a big element of this event. And a couple of them had bought some pretty good Bordeaux along. And thanks to you, actually, I was able to slip an older bottle of the Anthony Rupert blend into the wine conversation. And the Bordeaux had a couple of glasses had gone down. The blend vanished, and we managed to procure a second bottle, which also vanished. And that was, I love those moments when I'm able to give people something South African where their expectations either aren't there or they aren't terribly high, and you just see their eyes open up and they go, wow, this is something special.
Yeah, it's I received one of those sort of stories the other day where in the Lion's Head, serves a lot of in Atlanta, serves a lot of top end South African wine, and they're actually out on tour in the winelands currently. So, but they said the sommelier sent us like a little video clip of these are the wines that we poured blind and what have you, and it was fantastic to see. The blend performed extremely well, the 15 and the other South African wines that really performed against. It was all blind, but against Lafite and some of the top Californian wines, and those sort of things where you just like, I think keeps you motivated and passionate about selling the South African story and what we produce. So yeah, I think we're not Bordeaux, but we're close on the heels of producing wines.
Yeah, but I think it's important to understand that we're very happily not Bordeaux, just as Bordeaux is not Franschhoek or Stellenbosch, or Burgundy is not Hemelanada, or Rhone is not necessarily Swartland, or whatever you take as your point of comparison. Yeah. And we've got to that stage in the South African industry where we're proud enough of who we are and where we're at. I think that sense of identity is really important to the next chapter of premium wine in South Africa.
No, definitely. And I think it's just more confidence. I think producers are a lot more confident in what we're doing. And we're producing better and better every year. So.
As we've got you here, and as I have it in hand, wine that's wowed many people, especially this tournament. Tell me a little bit about this specific wine. What is it for you that allows this to come together and say, right, when you deliver your new vintage to your home and say, here we go, you can do so confident that, you know what, it's not going to get better than this?
Yeah, so I think, our property in Franschhoek is really grows Bordeaux varieties extremely well. So, and Cabernet Franc being the best in my opinion. And it's, I think it's a bit of an X factor of our Cabernet Franc. This is a blend of 40 cab Franc and then 20 Merlot. And some years it will smidgen of Petit in, depending on that. So I think, we're drinking the 2016 in our tasting. Is we're very fortunate having a proprietor that believes in aging in these wines. So first of all, I'm not going to serve him something too young, but the wine has amazing sort of structure that can last long. So it's approachable and delicious. I think that's the one important part. But I think what really stands out for me is just the blend, where often sometimes Cabernet Franc is more the back end and sort of in the background. This is really adding a lot more. So it's 1 + 1 = 3, I think. But I know that's Marisburg College maths.
That doesn't surprise me because of the wines outside of this. It is your Cabernet Franc that I would say we drink consistently. My wife drinks consistently because usually when I get back from the trip, what I have left, she's demolished, and very happily so. But that Cabernet Franc conversation, it's one we've had before, one we will have again. But I love the fact that it's playing such a big role in this wine. As we look ahead to not just this particular week where you're showcasing all this great wine, but as you go beyond, you've got more travel coming, you're taking more wine to more places. How genuinely upbeat is Blair Robertson about South African wine as a whole? Where do you think we are getting it really right? Where is there a little bit more work to be done?
Yeah, so I think we in South Africa it's pretty tight and sales are tough. I'm not going to say that, but I think there's definitely opportunities. So Asia, I don't think what I'm more positive about is actually Africa and the islands around there. I think it's been a bit more tourism. People are getting into wines, and it's right on my doorstep, And South Africans like traveling and into those sort of African countries. So I've definitely seen a bit of an upturn there, And people are traveling there and want to drink an African wine. South Africa is really, really made for it. So I definitely think there's some potential there. Some of the well-established markets, it's hard, So we've had an amazing run with the Swartland and certain wines and that come through and continue to carry on growing the category, which is fantastic. But it's hopefully where it swings is where people are wanting to drink premium at a better price, and I think South Africa is right into that sort of in line in the firing range for that. So
I'd love to hear that. That is music of the very best sort. Just before we do wrap up, a big thank you to a team at the Russiks in St Andrews for hosting us today. They are one particular place where I know going forward they're going to be selling vast amounts of South African wine. Who else in this fantastic town? You're coming along to play golf because it's rather well known for that. St Andrews, possibly go to university, but there's also a really good dining scene here in St Andrews. Who else would you like to pay tribute to? Where can people come and find some great South African wine?
I think the seafood It's just an amazing sort of spot
It's a
there.
crazy name for that, the seafood restaurant. You never know what they're going to serve on the menu.
They actually serve amazing venison. But yeah, so they've been a stalwart around there. The Rusak's regularly taking a focus on high-end meat. So that's the South African. It's definitely where you want to stop for a steak. The old course have also like switched up a little gear, and they're doing a great job. The Adamson, I'm on my way there to do a wine tasting this evening there. So there is a really amazing sort of dining scene here, and then just out on the edges, there's also a couple of places. Steak Barn, which is great, which is
a terrific place.
Yeah,
it's basically a cheese and yama in the middle of Scotland.
Exactly. So got it from the got it the idea from actually Mzoli's. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So there's some really. Obviously, it's a small town. It reminds me a lot of Stellenbosch, but yeah, fantastic. And you can walk around and drink premium South Africa.
Magic. Gareth, I know you've got a busy week ahead of you. Thank you, not just for always being a great friend to the show and a great guest of it, but you do a champion job in taking South African wine around the world, and every bottle we sell helps the whole industry. So we're very grateful for that.
Well, thanks, Dan, and thanks for being on the show. It's always great to be here, and looking forward to a successful week.
Here we go.
Cheers.
All right, well, that wraps us up. We're going to go and do some cheese and wine tasting and try and understand the Scots, which I generally find a glass of wine or two helps. Over the course of this week, look out for a few more glimpses of the Scottish food and wine scene on Dan Really Likes Wine. Make sure you get over to www.vote.pizza for the Pizzeria Challenge with Porcupine Ridge. It is a big one. Some great prizes to be won. And look out, coming up in the next few weeks, some rather well-known faces might be making a sneak and cameo appearance on Dan Really Likes Wine. Until then, from 18 at the Rusak's in St Andrews, this is Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Cheers from Scotland.